Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for one of my favorite videos every set release, and that is the top 10 Commander cards, this time from Ixalan, featuring, of course, Tomer. How's it going today, Tomer?
I'm doing well, Seth. This is my favorite video for sure. I'm always looking forward to these.
So, before we get to the cards, what do you think of Ixalan for Commander? To me, and I'm not a Commander expert like you, it feels like a pretty absurd Commander set, but I want to hear your take on it.
I am really excited about a couple things. The most excited basically about the Dinosaur tribe. I think they did a really good job pushing two tribes, dinosaurs and pirates, when they weren't viable before. So suddenly they're viable archetypes, and we have Ixalan. We're waiting for the next set to come out to finish the block. I think these two tribes are gonna be a lot of fun to play, especially when the entire block is released.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I also really like that it seems like they tried to tie this set in with the Commander 2017 set, which is something we haven't really seen before, but I mean, I guess, but instead of going into it, maybe we just start off with our honorable mentions, because this kind of directly leads into what I was saying. So our first honorable mentions include a bunch of black and white vampires, Maverick Fiend, Dusk Apostle, Vana Butcher of Magon, and Sanctum Seeker. So Tomer, to me, these are interesting because they relate so directly to the Commander 2017 deck. So what do you think about them?
You absolutely nailed it. I would say that the home of all of these cards is probably best suited in Edgar Markov. Generally, tribal vampires historically haven't really been in white. They've been primarily black, and then they have also went into red in Innistrad blocks. Edgar Markov is Mardu, however, red, black, and white. So now you can take advantage of all these white vampires that makes Edgar Markov even more appealing than he already was before. Suddenly, Ixalan has all these white vampires that I just can't wait to jam into Edgar Markov. Maverick Fiend, I think, is one of the best 3-drops for Edgar Markov. I don't think he's a commander in his own right, but very good in Edgar Markov. Vona is probably good as like a Orzhov good stuff commander by herself. Sanctum Seeker, amazing when Edgar Markov, because you want to do go wide strategy, is very good when paired with Maverin. So these vampires are really good for Edgar Markov, I would say.
Any quick thoughts on Raider's Wake before we move on?
Well, we've seen these type of abilities before. If somebody discards a card, you draw a card, or somebody discards a card, they lose life, like the Megram effects and stuff. This is just another ability that's really good for the discard deck, or the wheel deck. So Nikasar is famous for making everybody discard their hands, draw new hands, and profit off that. So it goes straight into there. And also Nath of the Gitleaf is a green-black version of the discard deck, where if you make your opponents discard, you gain elf tokens. So their new Raider's Wake, I think, is a new staple in both those archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing one of those decks, you kind of want as many Megrams as possible, and having another Megram, I guess, isn't a bad thing for those decks.
Yeah, and it has an upside with the raid, so.
Oh, that's true. That is really interesting that it can also force your opponent to discard as well. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, let's move on to our next page of honorable mentions. This time featuring the flip cards, and should probably warn everyone now, there's a lot of flip cards on our list today. Not just honorable mentions, but in the top 10. So, Tomer, Legion's Landing and Treasure Map, flipping around into Adonto the First Floor and Treasure Cove. What about these two?
So I want to say just a quick thing about the flip lands in general. I think the mechanic itself is just well suited towards Commander. Not that every single card that flips into a land is good, just that it's set up in a way that it's better suited towards Commander, because the hardest permanent type to get rid of in Commander is absolutely lands. There's just not a lot of answers for them. There's answers for creatures. I think those are the most fragile types. Planeswalkers, because you can attack into them. And then there's a lot of enchantments and artifact hate that you can have access to. Not a lot of ways to deal with lands, however. So flipping into a land is pretty good inherent protection. You can kind of expect it to be around. So that's always an upside when I'm evaluating these cards. So, starting off with Legion's Landing, I saw a lot of people gloss over this card, but I think it's actually a really good source of ramp in non-green decks. You pay 1 white, and the flip mechanic is pretty easy. You just have to attack with 2 more creatures because Legion's Landing supplements one of them, and then you immediately flip into a land that taps for white mana. That's excellent. And it has a quick upside. You can pay 4 mana to make a chump block or just more vampires for vampire synergies. So I think it's actually really good in any non-green deck that has a lot of creatures, and I think it's excellent in Edgar Markov because it is a non-green deck. It does take advantage of those vampire tokens, and I think it's very trivial for Edgar Markov to swarm the board because whenever you're playing a vampire, you're making tokens. You can easily get that 3 attacking creature trigger to flip it over. And they're vampires, so he likes vampires anyway.
What about Treasure Map? This one's a little weird to me. Is this like a treasure theme deck? I know you're a big fan of clue tokens. Is that treasure tokens next on your list of archetypes to build around?
Okay, so I really like clues. You know this. Everyone knows this. I think just having artifact tokens that it can be easily sacrificed, easily just spewed onto the table is very powerful. It makes just anything that cares about artifacts just a lot stronger. So affinity is a mechanic that works very well with artifacts. It turns on Metalcraft very easily. It works very well with Duretti, where you can sacrifice a treasure token to get like a much better artifact from your graveyard. So there's a lot of synergies that you can do with these tokens, not just sacrifice it for just 1 mana. So I really like it immediately. Treasure Map itself, if you're just playing it straight, you're paying 2 mana, then you're paying an additional mana to tap it and scry 1, and then eventually flip it. That's okay. But it gets a lot better if you have ways of untapping it multiple times so you can get that value out of it multiple times. Obviously the Paradox Engine, but like everything goes well with Paradox Engine. But just artifact decks in general run Voltaic Key, Clock of Omens, Unwinding Clock, a lot of ways to untap it and just reuse its ability so you can flip it over. And once you do flip it, it taps for mana, so obviously great, but it also lets you sacrifice treasure tokens if you have a bunch of them to draw cards. That's awesome. I think it's pretty good. And it generates 3 tokens by itself when it does flip.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these are really good. Like, getting an extra land is always fine. You want mana in Commander. Mm-hmm. The treasures are even more mana, and then Treasure Cove lets you draw cards, which is another thing you want to do in Commander. So, do you think you need a bunch of treasures to make it work, I guess is my question. Like, are you okay playing this as just a standalone, like, weird ramp type card, or do you need additional treasure producers to fuel the card draw once you flip it?
If I was running a deck that can consistently untap it so it can keep scrying it and flip it as quickly as possible, I probably wouldn't need any other cards that run treasures. But obviously, if you are running a deck that has a lot of these treasure token generators, it becomes really good.
All right, let's move on to our last page of honorable mentions. Our third flip card already. Vance's Blasting Cannons flips around in this Spitfire Bastion, Death Gorge Scavenger, and the updated, or maybe downgraded, I guess, Ghost Quarter Field of Ruin. So, Tomer, take it away.
So, I really like Outpost Siege as a way for red decks that are outside of blue and black and green. So basically, mono red and Boros decks, they typically struggle with card advantage. I really like Outpost Siege. It does the exact same thing as the first part of Vance's Blast Canning, where you essentially are drawing an extra card each turn, and you can play it immediately. But if you don't play it, then it gets exiled. Not a big deal. The flip ability is going to be a little bit difficult unless you are maybe running like a Spellslinger deck, or it's just later in the game where you just have a lot of mana and you drew a lot of cards or whatever, and you can flip it that way. Then it becomes a land, which is always great, especially in red-white. Like I said, doesn't have a lot of land ramp. This is land ramp, very hard to interact with. And also, if you have a lot of lands and a lot of mana available, you can Lightning Bolt repeatedly smaller creatures. Lightning Bolt itself never played in Commander because there's just a variety of of threats, some big, some small, so it doesn't hit that many of them. But when you have a repeatable source of lightning bolting that can also just tap for mana when you don't need it, that's really good. It takes out all the mana dorks, it takes out the oracles of Moldiah, it takes out like the Magus of the Coffers, and all these small dorky creatures that play a big role, and you don't really want to like spend a Swords of Plowshares on.
It's also nice and worth mentioning that you don't actually ever have to flip it either. Some of the enchantments require you to flip, so if you don't really want a land, you can just leave it on card advantage mode, even if you cast a whole bunch of spells in the same turn, keep drawing extra cards. So, I mean, Outpost Siege is a strong card that I enjoy too, so it seems like an Outpost Siege that kind of has an upgrade in the sense that if you do really want to lightning bolt something, you can kind of manipulate to flip it around and kill something important. If you don't need to, then just keep drawing cards with it and be happy that way. What about a Deathgorge Scavenger, Tomer?
Well, I really like Scavenging Ooze for a bunch of decks in terms of a flexible, repeatable source of graveyard hate that is also attached to a creature. Green is really good at synergizing with creatures. It has lots of creature tutors, like Worldly Tutor, and it can also just drop them into the battlefield too. So having a graveyard removal on a stick is actually really appealing in green decks. Like I said, Scavenging Ooze is really good. Deathgorge Scavenger plays the role of Scavenging Ooze in a very similar way. Instead of paying mana to repeatedly exile things, you don't have to pay any mana, but it does require attacking or entering the battlefield to do so. I think maybe Scavenging Ooze is a little bit better overall in a generic deck, but in decks that are just splashing green, for example, Deathgorge Scavenger gets a lot better. And also in the dinosaur deck, you have now a dinosaur with interaction built in, which is always great.
Yeah, and worth mentioning here that it doesn't exile from the person you're attacking graveyard. You can hit any graveyard, so you can kind of, if you really need to get rid of a reanimation threat, you might be able to work out a deal with one of your other opponents that's kind of mutually beneficial, like, I'll attack you, don't kill my dinosaur, and I'll exile that Alishnorn that's in whoever's graveyard or something. So I like that aspect of it. Field of Ruin, is that just another Ghost Quarter type of fact, or is there something different about it?
It's basically, in my eyes, a superior Ghost Quarter, because it's not just helping the opponent that you destroyed the land of, it helps everybody at the table, so it's like a net. It's not as much of a sting, I would say. It's also kind of neat in landfall decks, for example. If you're looking to get landfall triggers and also have a strip mine ability to deal with non-basic lands that can be problematic, like all the flip lands we just mentioned, then it's another way of triggering landfall in your deck. I think it's really neat, and it's going to be very affordable too. It's just an uncommon.
It's always nice to include some number of these type of effects in your deck, because there's always powerful lands in Commander. Like, it's so easy for someone to take over the game with an Emiria or an Urborg with Cabal Coffers. There's so many effects like that, so it's a nice way to hedge. It's going to be very budget friendly, and in Commander that doesn't value mana efficiency to the same extent that like Modern or Legacy or Standard even does, the fact that you got to pay 2 mana isn't that big of a deal, especially since you don't end up losing a land from it, which is definitely a nice upside there. Well, let's move on from our not as quick as we thought honorable mentions and get to the top 10 list prop. Oh my god, there's another whole slide of honorable mentions.
I'm sorry.
All right. Just kidding. We're still on honorable mentions. All right, Tomer, the one-sentence version of Arcane Adaptation, Captivating Crew, Hostage Taker, and Deep Root Waters. Go.
Okay, Arcane Adaptation is not a tribal card, because generally your tribal decks are going to be mostly the creatures of the tribe, and it's not worth it the higher the percentage of the on-creature type tribal decks you run. But it is a good combo card. So Arcane Adaptation with Timbermaw Ranger, for example, Infinite Wolves, and then you just win the game. Very good in general Tazri. Captivating Crew, there are decks that are all about threatening, stealing your opponent's creatures, and then sacrificing them for value. This is a very Jund thing to do. Oh, we saw Tom use it in Shattergang Brothers, but you could also do it in Temur and stuff like that. So Captivating Crew, repeatable source of threat effects. excellent. Hostage Shaker I really like because it's a way of dealing with opposing artifacts in a unique way, and you can even steal them. I think this is one of the best pirates for the pirate tribe, and might even see play outside of it. It's also an enter the battlefield trigger, so you can repeatedly steal things if you can bounce it and blink it and all that stuff. Deeper Waters is just a very simple merfolk tribal enchantment. You get just more merfolks to play around with, so that's another 1/1 that you can pump up with Lord of Atlantis and other Lord effects. You can champion it with Wanderer One Prophets. You can just attack with it to draw cards with Coastal Piracy and all that stuff. It's good. It's solid.
Well, I'll go with you on those, other than just to reiterate how much I love Hostage Shaker as just a way for blue-black decks to hit an artifact, which is something that those colors just don't do very well. So I think even outside of Pirates, it's just, if you're in blue and black without access to another color, it's just a really good thing to run in your deck, and you even get to steal it, which is kind of nice too. Like, definitely, I've played plenty of Gontis. It's kind of like Gontis from the battlefield. So, all around, I really like Hostage Shaker a lot.
Remove a threat. At the very least, you're stealing a Sol Ring. At the very least, and that's amazing. Like, you only got your Sol Ring, pay an extra 1, and now I have my Sol Ring on the battlefield. It's great.
Yeah, that is definitely super awesome. So those were our honorable mentions, which means it's time for the actual top 10 list. Starting
Buckle
off,
in.
Number 10, Axis of Mortality. This card is super wacky, but looks really fun. Tomer, what do you think about this life switcher?
So, quick disclaimer about the top 10. These aren't like the top most competitive cards or the top most powerful cards, because it's subjective. This is just the top most cards that I am psyched about playing with. So starting it off is Axis of Mortality. This is the ultimate life-swapping card because it does it repeatedly, and it's only costs 6 mana, so that's actually pretty undercosted for similar effects that we've seen in the past. This card is good in one type of deck, but it is an all-star, probably the best card in that deck, and that is a life-swapping deck, like I mentioned. The best commander for it is Selenia Dark Angel. You can, basically the concept is to lower your life total as low as it can go, by either using greed effects to draw cards and lose life, or just do a whole bunch of effects that incidentally make you lose life. Selenia just drops you however much you want instantly. It's great. And then when you have a low life total, you swap it with an opponent, and you can immediately burn them out or extort them out or all that sort of fun stuff. So it's an all-star in the Selenia deck. I wrote a budget article on Selenia fairly recently. I wouldn't make many changes to it other than just dropping an Axis of Mortality and then calling it a day. And it's going to be really sweet.
Yeah, I think it's the best card at what it does. So other effects like this are usually one-shot effects, or I think it's Soul Conduit. I think it's Soul Conduit. That's much more expensive. It's 6 to cost and then 6 to activate. So the fact that you just get to play this for 6 mana and use it every upkeep for free is actually really efficient for what it does. Also, beyond the life switching stuff you were talking about, super sweet with like Sanguine Bond combos, Tainted Remedy, all the stuff that cares about, like you gaining life, your opponent losing life, and then something cool happens. Because this is huge chunks of life gain and life loss, because a lot of people actually get confused by this, but in the Magic rules, if you are at 10 life and Axis of Mortality puts you up to 40 life, the Magic rules actually see that as you gaining 30 life. So anything that cares about your life gain, if you have a Cradle of Vitality, you can pay 2, put 30 counters on something. There's tons of really interesting, sweet things you can do with the huge chunks of life gain. So I'm excited for it there, and definitely seems like the kind of card that I would enjoy playing, even if it's not super competitive and in a like I'm gonna win the match type of way necessarily.
Yeah. And even if you're not comboing with any pieces on the board, it's super political too. Like, why would somebody attack you and lower your life total if you're just going to swap it with them afterwards? So you can start convincing people, hey, you should attack somebody else because then I can do life swaps. It's something mutually beneficial for both of us.
Ooh, that is interesting. I didn't really consider the political aspects of it.
Yeah. It's either a way to make friends or also make enemies probably at the same time.
It's a way to make something happen.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to number 9 on our list. And I love this card. Revel in Riches. Tomer, are you using this to win the game? Just to make mana in your black deck? What's the plan with Revel in Riches?
It's not the best way to make mana because I think black market still is the best at that sort of as an enchantment around. I think it's like 5 mana cost to do it. It does a similar thing whenever creatures die on your first main phase. I think you put that much black mana, so it's repeatable. It's excellent. Black market's excellent. Revel in Riches does kind of similar, but it also generates a lot of artifact tokens, which I said are awesome for previous reasons. Obviously works very well with Treasure Map. But yeah, then it could also win you the game. And it's also in black, so keep in mind black is very good at killing creatures, especially mass creatures, stuff like Damnation, Toxic Deluge, and all that stuff. So if you have a lot of mana, which black is very able to do with stuff like Cabal Coffers and Black Market and whatnot. You could, for example, play Revel in Riches and then Damnation, wipe the board, and you're basically set up for a win the next turn. Or you can just use it as a mana generator / artifact synergies. Both work very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's in black, which gives you a lot of tutors, which means I plan on just going all in and building around this card. There's some really janky, fun things you can do with giving your opponent tokens, for example. You can play cards like Illness in the Ranks or Virulent Plague, which makes all tokens get a static -1, -1, -2, -2. Then you can use like Forbidden Orchard to give your opponent's token. There's the Hunted cycle, like Hunted Phantasm is 3 mana and gives an opponent 5/1/1. So instead, you get this huge 4/6 for 3 mana, and you get 5 treasure tokens, which so you're actually like netting mana off of it. There's those weird, like the Hungry Links that gives your opponent the Death Touch rat every turn, which would immediately die. Yes. So I kind of want to go all in on that aspect of it and build.
I think
like
this is a preview
or something. Yeah. So
this is a preview for like the next Commander Clash / Against the Odds.
Yeah. So that's what I'm excited about doing. It'll probably be super horrible, but I just love those decks with so many moving pieces, and it's even the win conditions. So you don't need like a payoff. You just make all these tokens. If you can make enough of them as you're doing all this super janky token killing stuff, it actually just wins you the game on its own as well. So I think it's a super fun build around, and I'm definitely really excited. This might be the card that I'm most excited to build around out of all Ixalan.
Well, I can't wait to see the deck and get crushed by it in Commander Clash.
Next week, perhaps. All right, let's move on to number 8 on our list. Back to the world of split cards. Search for Azcanta in Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. So, Tomer, what do you think of this one?
Well, like I said, flip land's already good because the flip side is probably not going to get destroyed, or it's hard to destroy it at the very least. And the enchantment side, it's 2 mana for basically a superior scry effect. You get like a scry 1, but instead of putting it at the bottom of your library, you can put it in your graveyard, which is always better because it sets up reanimation. Like you put a big creature into your graveyard and then get it back with an Animate Dead or a Sun Titan or whatever, depending on your colors. Or you could go like Spellslinger. Spellslinger might like it too because you just jam a bunch of cards into the graveyard and you can flip it easily. So the enchantment side is actually pretty good by itself. Scry 1 plus put it in the graveyard is great for any graveyard strategies. And in a graveyard deck, you're probably going to be flipping it very quickly. So it's like 2 mana in blue to get a legendary land that taps for blue. And then it has an upside. Pay 4 mana to look at the top 4 cards of your library, basically Impulse. And then you get a non-creature, non-land card among them. So an enchantment, or if you're in the Spellslinger deck, you can get an instant sorcery and just grab it. So I think both sides are good effects, and at the mana cost of just 2, I think is very playable.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of value to be had in all kinds of decks. Obviously, if you can use your graveyard, it's even better if there's value there. Or if you're playing something with a lot of spells, a more controlling deck with not many creatures, maybe a Super Friends deck because you can grab Planeswalkers, or some sort of extra turn deck because it helps you dig for more extra turn spells. So there's a lot of possibilities there, and it's going to be super easy to flip this around. Getting 7 cards in your graveyard, especially with this giving you potentially 1 free one each turn, especially if you're playing with fetch lands and stuff like that. It's pretty trivial to get enough cards in your graveyard to flip it around. And then the ability is really cheap. 3 mana is a super fair price for looking at 4 cards and just drawing a card. So I could imagine playing this in a lot of different decks. Maybe if you're a heavy creature type deck, then it's probably not quite as good because you won't be able to abuse the back half. But anything with a lot of spells, feels like this is a pretty easy inclusion. Well, let's move on to number 6 on our list, and more flip cards. Primal Amulet and Primal Wellspring. So this is a little bit like GIshath's Sanctum, I believe, making your spells cheaper, and then flips around to an incredibly powerful land, copying your stuff for free. It's like Pyromancer's Goggles, but it makes mana of any color. So Tomer, what do you want to do with this, except for taking all the turns? Don't say that. Something non that.
I don't want to take all the turns with it. Well, like, Spellslinger, obviously, is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, archetype in Commander. So, basically, the top side, as you said, is like GIshath's Sanctum. Instead of getting to scry every single time you cast an instant and sorcery, you get to eventually flip it into this super land, this super power Pyromancer's Goggles. It taps for mana, gives you some ramp, and it duplicates all the instants or sorceries. The bigger and flashier your spell, the better it gets. Obviously, like you said, extra turns is going to be great, but just like doubling a Comet Storm, making it trivially lethal or something like that is always great. I think it's a good source of ramp, kind of expensive at 4, but when you flip it, it's so worth it, I think.
I just played a sweet Wildfire deck for Budget Magic, and that's kind of what I want to do. So add that to the list of things you can expect incoming on a future Commander Clash.
The Wildfire Time Warp deck coming soon to Commander Clash.
Number 5 on our list. Still flip cards. So many sweet flip cards. Dowsing Dagger flips around into, it's just a casual Gilded Lotus. A casual Gilded Lotus in land form. So, Tomer, what do you think of this one?
So, I really like another equipment that ramps. Is sort of the Animist. It's a 2 mana. I think it's 2 or 1 to equip. Gives the creature +1/+1, and whenever you attack with the creature, you get to search your library for a basic land card, put it into play tapped. So it is basically a 4 mana investment for a rampant growth effect that becomes afterwards free to keep repeating the ability. I think this is really, really good in decks that obviously have creatures, so you can equip Dowsing Dagger to something consistently and swing with it. And it's also really good in non-green decks that, again, struggle with land ramp. Land ramp is the most secure source of ramp because artifacts will be destroyed, enchantments will be destroyed, but lands generally stick around unless it really bothers them and somebody spends a strip mine, if they even put a strip mine in their deck. So Lost Veil is a very secure source of huge mana ramp, very trivial to attack with too, because you give some defenders to an opponent, but in Commander you're generally having 3 opponents if you're playing like a typical 4-player free for all. So it's pretty easy to find somebody that is unopened, or maybe you could do like a sort of like a bartering system or like make a mutual ally to get it flipped. Or if you're playing a deck that has a lot of evasive creatures like Edric, for example, you can just put it on a flyer and swing in anyway. It should be very easy to flip it. So 4 mana for a Gilded Lotus that is very difficult to deal with is great in my books.
I can already picture this happening. It's going to be Tomer plays Dowsing Dagger, and it's going to be like, Seth, if you don't kill me for the next 2 turns, I'll give you 2 0/2s. Like, Tomer, they're 0/2s, please. Seriously, though, a land that taps for 3 is super powerful, and it's going to be really easy to flip. So it seems like a card that you can just play in any deck with a reasonable number of creatures. From a more meta perspective, Tomer, we have talked about a ton of cards that flip into really powerful lands.
I really like them.
If you're building a commander deck, are you going to put or make sure to put more tech edges, ghost quarters, strip mines in your deck than you were before? Like, does this have an impact on the game as a whole in your deck building process? Because everyone's going to be playing these cards?
I believe so. I think there's a lot of powerful flip lands in this set, and there's probably going to be a few more in the next part of Ixalan. So I think strip mines are going to be more and more needed, I think. Just because more people are going to be running across these really powerful lands that you need an answer to. Like, we already have a ton of really powerful lands. We have Gaia's Cradle, we have Cabal Coffers, we have Emeria, we have Valakut, Maze of Ith, and all those powerful lands. But there's just going to be more of them now. And I think that's going to start pushing people towards trying to find some land answers, like Wake of Ruin, for example.
Well, let's move on to number 5 on our list. Waking Sun's Avatar. We're back to the world of dinosaurs. We talked about one during our honorable mentions. Is this the best of the dinosaurs to come out of Ixalan, Tomer?
In a multiplayer sense, I think so. That's why I mentioned it. I didn't want to focus too much on any tribe or any certain archetype in the top 10, but I really wanted to throw a bone to Wakening Sun's Avatar because the biggest thing I think a lot of dinosaur decks are going to be cutting short on is going to be interaction. And Wakening Sun's Avatar is basically Kindred Dominance. That was a 7-mana sorcery that came in Commander 2017. You choose a creature type, and then all other creature types are destroyed. This is kind of like that, except you're paying one more extra, but you're getting a 7/7 dinosaur onto the battlefield. So it's a relevant creature type in the dinosaur deck, and it's a 7/7, so it's a great beater. And 8 mana for this effect is still marvelous. Like, at any point of the game, whenever your opponents have a lot of creatures, just drop Wakening Sun's Avatar and you have a one-sided board wipe that furthers your board. I think that's excellent. 8 mana's a lot, but I mean, you still get a lot of value out of it.
And yeah, I mean, it's obviously at its best if you're playing a dinosaur deck and can really break the non-dinosaur synergy. But I think this is probably just fine as a Wrath. Like, it's an 8-mana Wrath that leaves behind a 7/7. That's actually not that horrible. I guess, I mean, you have like Phyrexian Rebirth and some of that kind of stuff, which is somewhat similar. Cheaper, but it is another effect like that. So I think it could be okay as just a big-bodied Wrath, but clearly in dinosaurs, this has got to be one of the most powerful cards you can play in your deck, because not only is it a Wrath, but we talked about this during the Commander reviews a little bit. If you're a dinosaur deck, it's a Wrath that you play pre-combat main phase, your opponents lose all their blockers, and you have a huge board full of dinosaurs, and you probably just kill at least one person, and if things are going well, you might just wipe out the whole board by getting rid of all your opponent's defense. So it seems super good as a finisher for the dinosaur deck. Well, let's move on to number 4 on our list, Tishana, Voice of Thunder. Tomer, is this one a member of the 99 or pretty clearly a commander? Where do you see this fitting?
I think it's both. I threw it here because I can't deny the raw power of Tishana. The amount of cards you can draw is insane, and then Tishana herself is going to be a huge creature to deal with. Even better if it's a commander, because then she can deal commander damage. Only 21 to kill anybody. So I see her as both a commander in a go-wide strategy deck, something I don't actually see a lot in blue-green, but has a lot of potential, and she is definitely a high contender for that. And she's also really good in just a general other type of Simic deck. As part of the 99, because her enter the battlefield effect is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this weird inverted Prime Speaker Zagana. Like, that's the card it reminds me of, but it rewards something very different, where it really does want you to have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield to really take full power of it. I was wondering, Tomer, you'd probably know this better than I would. I have never seen anyone play a Merfolk tribal deck in Commander? Is that a thing? Like, have you ever run into someone playing Merfolk Triber? And if so, is this in consideration for being the commander of Merfolk Tribal?
I definitely think so, depending on the style of Merfolk. There aren't, as you said, a lot of Merfolk Tribal contenders out there for the leadership. There's Sig River Guide, I believe, which is Azorius colors that you can do some cute things with. It mostly focuses on the Lorwyn cards. And then there's also like Varel of the Hulklad. If you want to go and focus on +1/+1 counters, which is a mechanic that is being pushed into Merfolk, at least for Ixalan. So he would synergize a lot better there. But if you are going wide with Merfolk, then Tishana's excellent, and she plays very well with all the Merfolk lords that care about lots of creatures, giving them +1/+1 and island walk and whatnot. And also Deeproot Waters, the new enchantment, goes very well with her. So if you are going for like a tokens deck or a go wide strategy with Merfolk, I think she's excellent. If you're going for a +1/+1 strategy, I think I'd rather go with Varel of the Hulklad or Prime Speaker Zagana. It just really depends on the flavor. Right now, what we really need is just a lot more viable Merfolk cards for multiplayer, because we're kind of lacking that.
Well, if you decide to build a dinosaur deck, I'm guessing that perhaps our number 3 card will be your commander, GIshath
Yes.
Sun's avatar. Is this just always the dinosaur commander? Like 100% of the time you build dinosaurs, this is your commander? Is that pretty much where we're at with GIshath?
Honestly, I think so. Like, if you're restricting yourself to dinosaurs, you need to have a dinosaur legend. GIshath lets you play all the dinosaurs because dinosaurs are solidly in Naya. It's a giant effect, which is exactly what you want to do if you're playing a dinosaur deck. And the triggered ability is actually really strong. I mean, you're paying 8 mana. That's a lot for a commander. You are still in green, though, so ramp is something that you're going to be readily accessible to. And when GIshath does enter the battlefield and does deal combat damage to a player, the effect is really, really flashy, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Dinosaur Tribal and you have, I don't know, 30, 40 dinosaurs in your deck, odds are in favor. If you can get in a full hit with GIshath, you're going to get at least 1 and hopefully 2. And if you're lucky, even more dinosaurs directly on the battlefield, which is, it's essentially adding at a minimum like 5 mana, and sometimes it's going to be like 10 or 15 mana that you're getting for free when you hit with GIshath. So even though it's really expensive, the fact that it has the combination of haste and trample to let you attack right away and get in damage and hopefully get some dinosaur friends to come along with it kind of makes up for that a little bit. You avoid the, I play my 8 mana commander, I spent all my mana, I really need to untap next turn, and then your opponents kill it, and then you gotta get to 10 mana, then 12 mana, which can sometimes happen with those really expensive commanders, but the ability to do something right away helps make up for that a little bit, I think, if you're gonna put that much of an investment into your commander. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think GIshath is kind of the perfect win condition if you set up the deck properly. The trick with GIshath really is, first of all, you want to have a haste enabler for all the creatures, all the dinosaurs that you're going to flip onto the battlefield, but you also want to take extra combat steps. GIshath really likes extra combat steps, also double strike, to get more of those triggers on the field. So what I can imagine going on is you have like Fires of Yavimaya, Fervor, something to give all your creatures haste. You swing in with GIshath, you flip a bunch of dinosaurs, then you play just any sort of extra combat step, like a Reckless Assault, for example, and swing with all the dinosaurs that you just flipped over, and that's going to easily be lethal.
Let's move on to our other new tribe. Well, mostly new. Technically, pirates have been around for a long time, but number 2 on our list, we have, again, I think, another 100% commander. Like, if you're pirates, this is the card, Admiral Beckett Brass. So, Tomer, apart from being the only pirate commander going, what do you think of the Admiral?
Admiral Beckett Brass is the pirate commander everybody's been waiting for. You're in Grixis, so you have access to all the good pirates ever printed. She is aggressively costed. She has a good global effect of giving all your creatures +1/+1, and she does a very on-theme thing of just like looting and pillaging when you attack with your creatures.
I really love, when I first saw Admiral Beckett Brass, I was a little skeptical of the ability. It seems like getting in 3 pirates hitting your opponent and having them have good things to steal might be kind of rare. But now that we see the whole set, pirates, kind of their thing is they're really evasive and tricky. They're like unblockable, and they have flying, and they have all this stuff. So even though it looks a little bit hard to do, because of the way pirates work, I think it's actually not as challenging as it looks to get in a hit with 3 pirates. And then things are awesome. Like, you can steal any non-land permanent, and it's not until Admiral Beckett Brass leaves the battlefield, so even if it ends up dying, you still get to keep the permanent. So I'm definitely excited for this one. You did mention, though, you were a little skeptical on pirates being able to be a real deck right away. Do you think we gotta wait for Rivals of Ixalan to kind of flesh out the tribe a little more?
I honestly think it's going to be playable. I think we have enough pirates to make a decent pirate deck. I don't think the new pirate cards, however, are as well suited as the new dinosaur cards were for Commander. I think some of the new dinosaurs are just a little bit better suited towards Commander than the pirates were. But that's just at first glance. I could be wrong if I'm playing both tribes, both decks, and maybe I'll change my mind. But I think it's going to work out fine. The deck is obviously going to be creature-focused and have lots of sources of evasion, have stuff like Coastal Piracy to draw a lot of cards. Maybe if you're running low on pirates, you could run Arcane Adaptation and Conspiracy, both in the colors of Admiral Beckett Brass, to change your other creatures into pirates if need be. So I think it's going to work out fine. And also, obviously, what you want to be running with her triggered ability, Strionic Resonator. You can steal 2 things instead of just 1.
Ooh, that is definitely super sweet. Just make sure it's not bugged on Magic Online.
Oh, goodness.
I have to say, though, overall, big props to Wizards. It feels like they are learning, and they gave us a pirate legend. It's sweet. They gave us a dinosaur legend. It's sweet. We even got legends for the other 2 tribes, even though those kind of already exist. So I'm definitely super happy that they did this, and it's not like a, oh, well, wait for Rivals of Ixalan type of thing, or, oh, wait for Return to Ixalan 3 years from now. So it seems like Wizards has learned from some of their mistakes and are definitely making sure that Commander players have what they need to at least try to build around these tribes right out of the gate on release day. You can build a pirate deck, you can build a dinosaur deck, no problem. So I'm super happy that they did that this time around.
Yeah, they didn't pull a werewolf on us.
Yeah. Well, this brings us to the number 1, very top of our list, and flip cards. Flip cards again. Growing Rites of ITLIMOC and ITLIMOC Cradle of the Sun. So Gaia's Cradle. Who would have thought that would be a good card for Commander?
Yeah, right? Who plays Gaia's Cradle? Well, the people who can afford it, I guess.
So
but
what do you think, Dover?
Green's major thing is being creature focused. That's what they like doing. That's the thing the color has the most synergies with. It rewards you for playing a lot of creatures, which is what you're 9 times out of 10 going to be doing anyway in green. It has an enter the battlefield ability that is good. It already kind of cantrips, but it's kind of better because you're probably going to hit a creature card. You can blink it and bounce it to get more value out of it, I guess, if you don't have enough creatures. But at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 more creatures, which is trivial again in a creature-focused deck, you transform it into a Gaia's Cradle. It's even better, though, because if your board does get wiped, and you severely need mana, it does tap for 1 green, period, at the very least. So that's always nice. I think this card is insane. It's great for any creature-focused deck. Obviously, decks that are running like Mana Dorks, like Land War Elves, Birds of Paradise, all of those fun cards. It gets even better because you just get more value out of it quicker. You get to flip it quicker. It's really great in tokens decks that Selesnya is often known about, like Tristani or Rise the Redeemed, because you just make a lot of 1/1s. It's very easy to flip it. So it's going to make a splash in a bunch of creature-focused decks or token decks.
Yeah, I mean, Gaia's Cradle is one of it's an incredibly powerful hit. It is so strong. If you've never played with it, it is a very easy way to win the game, even without building around it. Yes, it's awesome when you add 8 mana to cast a Genesis Wave or something like that, but even just when it's tapping for 3 mana and you're casting your Garrux and your huge green creatures way earlier than you should be, it's really easy to get ahead when you have a land that's tapping for that much mana.
Even 2. Like, 2 mana, tapping for 2 mana, and it comes into play on tap. That's insane.
Do you think it's going to be hard to flip? I guess that's the question. Like, do you have to build around it at all? Or do you just play your typical, I'm playing a green deck, I can play Growing Rites of ITLIMOC, and it will end up being a Gaia's Cradle fairly easily?
I think if you're playing like a big stompy deck, like maybe not dinosaurs, for example, because dinosaurs you generally want, you're playing big dinosaurs, or like a dragons deck, for example, but any deck like Edric, for example, or any tokens deck, any of them, or any deck that focuses their land ramp or their ramp on mana dorks instead of lands, are going to love it. So Ixalan, Wanderer Bard's going to love it. Revel is going to love it. There's a lot of green decks that are going to love it. Not every single one, though, like you mentioned. That's a fair point. Like, Xenagos decks are probably not going to enjoy it, and decks that focus on land ramp instead of mana dorks aren't going to love it. It's probably going to be okay, but not an instant auto-include all-star like it's going to be in some other decks. But I feel like of all the cards that we reviewed and mentioned, this one is the card that has the most potential to see the most amount of play in general in all play groups.
So, one more question about Growing Rites of ITLIMOC. Do you see this at all, or can this work at all, like a budget replacement for Gaia's Cradle? Like, if you're building a deck and you're like, I can't afford Gaia's Cradle, can that do that? Like, does it flip consistently enough? Can you rely on it? How close is it to a real Gaia's Cradle?
I think the decks that Gaia's Cradle is going to be insane in are the exact same decks that are going to want Growing Rites. I think if you can shell out the money to have a Gaia's Cradle in a deck that it's really good in, then you're going to just be putting in Growing Rites alongside it. And yeah, for people who can't afford a Gaia's Cradle or just don't want to spend that much money on a land, then Growing Rites is an excellent replacement. It's gonna be a little bit harder to flip, I guess. Like, if you have 2 creatures, then you're already getting value out of Gaia's Cradle, but you will still need 2 more for Growing Rites to actually flip. And it does cost 3 mana instead of being a land that you can tutor up. But just keep in mind, Growing Rites does at least do something when it enters the battlefield. It is going to usually get a creature if you are in a creature-focused deck. So I think it's a step down from Gaia's Cradle, which is a great thing. But any deck that really wants Gaia's Cradle, like really wants it, is going to love Growing Rites and are going to be running both if they can.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Ixalan cards for Commanders. So, Tomer, any last thoughts on anything on the way out the door today?
I'm really happy with the set overall. I don't think there's a lot of auto includes or staples for the format, other than the fact a lot of the legendary lands that, like the flip lands, are really good and well suited towards the format. But I really love that dinosaurs have been pushed and have a good set role in a set archetype. I'm excited to see more of them fill out the roster. I'm excited to see more pirates. I think they just did a really good job, both mechanically and just lore-wise, how the mechanics work. I think just everything works out very well, and I hope to see pirates and dinosaurs at my local playgroups.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. Really sweet tribes. The flip cards are exciting. It's this I love the hidden treasure aspect where you're kind of literally flipping around into these reserve list cards that they can't even reprint anymore. So I love the flavor of it that way. So all around, I'm really excited for Ixalan. When I heard Pirates vs. Dinosaurs, I was a little like, is this just like a Hearthstone thing? Like, is this going to feel fresh and original? But I think they did an amazing job with this set, and I'm super excited to start playing with it. So anyway, Tomer, I think that wraps it up for today. So thanks for taking the time to hang out and talk some Ixalan Commander cards. It's always fun.
Thanks for having me. I always look forward to these.
And thanks to everyone for watching. So that's the top 10 Ixalan cards for Commander. Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.